By now, hopefully you have an idea about where your conflict that you're choosing for case study number one originated from, how it originated, a little bit of the history. Perhaps you can already describe the style of conflict it is. Is it direct violence? Does it involve cultural violence? Does it involve structural violence? Is it one-sided, two-sided? You certainly don't have to use all the models that we looked at in week 2, but definitely in this assignment you are asked to use at least a model in terms of describing your conflict. Actors is another area where you're not just to list actors but categorize and consider who the key actors are. So, obviously if you're looking at Rwanda, there is the Rwandans and the Tutsis and their militia or combatants, if you like. There are things like the media and the role that might have played. You can categorize them in different ways. Other nations or international organizations might have played a role. If you're doing Ireland, you might be looking at the IRA. So these are all very obvious actors, and I would suggest you try to limit your list in some way to around 5 key actors. When you're doing your research around your case study, you'll find certain actors or groups of actors are coming up all the time. So that's how you want to try to categorize them. Look for those common themes in your research. You're not being asked to reinvent the wheel or to say something that someone else hasn't already done. You're to pretend I don't know a lot. You're going to do a range of research in helping me to understand the conflict. So the meaningful information about actors is not only who they were, what they did, how they contributed to the conflict, what their motives and claims were. It's only 1,500 words, so that's why you don't want to have, 20 actors listed, because you just wouldn't get around to the rest of it, which is also origins and sources. So week 3, you'll find, I think it's in module 3.2, there's a list of typical sources of conflict. You don't have to use these or use those exact terms. All it's saying is that as you do your reading, you'll often find, there's ethnic and religious type of grievances usually involved. There's territorial grievances that might be involved. There's political independence or grievances that might be involved. East Timor, for example, was a secessionist movement trying to break away from the government. So you often have 1 or 2 key sources of conflict. So even though when you talk about the origins and the history of your conflict, what the sources is going to do is go into a little bit more depth. So you're saying something about these sources of conflict more generally, but then let's have a look at my case. Let's have a look at East Timor. Let's have a look at Bosnia. Let's have a look at Rwanda. Let's have a look at North Ireland. Let's have a look at, whatever the conflict is you've chosen, Israel or Palestine. And we see here, there's territorial grievance and there's religious grievance as 2 main sources of conflict. Now let's look and discuss these sources of conflict a little bit more widely, and I'm going to use my research and match it to this example. So that's how you're meant to deal with sources. I know in essays and, let alone reports, there's never one perfect way to structure anything. So the main thing to remember in reports is to have meaningful headings. Okay, and when we ask you to talk about origins, actors and sources, whatever the headings are, we're going to want to see those areas, to see you go into those things in some depth. And just to make it particularly easy, weeks 2 and 3, the modules and the readings in weeks 2 and 3, the type of material we go through in weeks 2 and 3, they are going to be your key weeks for assignment number 1, which I think makes it quite nicely contained. And certainly as your ELA, come to me if you have a plan. I will accept usually up to a A4 type page of dot points saying what you intend to put in your essay. Ideally, do a little bit of reading and have a bit of a think about it first, because otherwise my response to you might not make a lot of sense. So you need some context to start with. Otherwise, I might as well be talking French, and I definitely don't talk French. Now, the other thing that's going to happen this week on Thursday night is there's going to be a Collaborate session. If you're in Queensland like me, it's 8 p.m. on Thursday. If you're down southern states, it's likely to be 8 p.m. or adjust your clock accordingly. But 8 p.m., Australian Eastern Standard Time is going to be the Collaborate session. This will be a good chance to discuss some of these things and have a Q&A. If you can't make the Collaborate session, there's 2 other things that I want to note. One is that the Q&A thread is already up and going, and I have also put the slides for the Collaborate session on there. So you'll find them fairly detailed, so you can always have a look at them, as well as, of course, always read your assignment instructions. Don't just go by the slides and the discussion, but make sure you've read it for yourself, because that's saying this is exactly what you need to do. And importantly, you always have your criteria there. And when we mark, we pull out the criteria and we mark by the criteria. It's as simple as that. And then if you don't make Thursday night, the other thing you can do that I definitely encourage you to do is listen to the Collaborate recording. I try to keep Collaborate sessions certainly within half an hour of me talking. Sometimes there's a bit more dialogue or things happening in the text box, but you can guarantee that any Collaborate session I run, you will never ever need to give more than half an hour of your time to even listening to the recording. And when we come up to the smaller assessments, even less. So it's well worth it. I find I can always tell the questions people ask as to whether or not they've listened or engaged in the Collaborate sessions at all. It just shows. But what it also says to me is that it helps your understanding when you do attend. There's something about someone talking something through that makes a difference. So keep emailing, stay on the discussion boards by all means, and please come to the Collaborate session or listen to a recording, but I think ideally come along, and I hope that this course is going well for you. Thank you.